Susan Brown sat by the window, her porcelain cup trembling slightly in her hand. The soft drizzle outside mirrored the turmoil in her heart. Her husband, Peter, had been distant for months, and she couldn't ignore the creeping suspicion that something was wrong. Susan was a woman of grace and resilience, but even she wasn't immune to the shadows of doubt that had begun to haunt her. Peter, a successful lawyer in his early 40s, had always been her rock. But lately, his late-night meetings and cryptic phone calls had driven a wedge between them. "It's work, Sue," he would say with a strange smile. Yet, Susan's instincts told her otherwise. One crisp autumn morning, Susan noticed a moving truck across the street. A woman stepped out, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders. She had an air of mystery that intrigued Susan. Later, during a chance meeting at the local market, Susan introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Susan," she said, extending her hand. The woman's emerald eyes sparkled. "Cecilia Carter. Just moved here. It's lovely to meet you." As the days passed, Susan and Cecilia grew close. Cecilia's wit and charm were infectious, and she quickly became a regular visitor to the Brown home. But something about Cecilia's lingering glances at Peter unsettled Susan. Susan's world began to shift when she found a silk scarf in Peter's car, a scarf that wasn't hers. Her heart raced as she confronted him that evening. "Whose scarf is this?" she asked, holding it up. Peter's face hardened. "It's a colleague's. She must have left it after a work meeting." The explanation seemed plausible, but Susan's unease grew. She started noticing small things, a sudden interest in new cologne, unexplained absences, and his guarded phone conversations. One evening, Susan's worst fears were confirmed. She followed Peter to a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. Her hands trembled as she saw him meet Cecilia in the lobby. The two embraced before disappearing into an elevator. Susan's world shattered. She returned home, her mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? What had she done to deserve this betrayal? The next day, Susan confronted Cecilia at her home. "How could you?" she demanded, tears streaming down her face. "I welcomed you into my life, and this is how you repay me." Cecilia's expression was a mix of guilt and defiance. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Susan. But Peter and I," she trailed off, unable to finish. Susan's anger boiled over. "You think that justifies destroying a marriage?" Cecilia said nothing, and Susan stormed out, determined to salvage her life. She hired a private investigator to uncover the extent of Peter's infidelity. What she learned was more than she had bargained for. Peter had been seeing Cecilia for nearly a year, and their affair was no fleeting romance. They had even discussed leaving their respective lives to be together. But Cecilia had her own secrets. The investigator uncovered a history of manipulation and deceit in her past relationships. She was a woman who thrived on chaos and destruction. Susan decided to confront Peter with the evidence. One evening, she laid out the photos and documents on the dining table. "Explain this," she said, her voice cold. Peter's face turned ashen. "Sue, Save it," she snapped. "I trusted you, Peter. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." Peter's defenses crumbled, and he broke down, confessing everything. "I made a mistake, Sue. I don't want to lose you. Susan faced a choice: forgive Peter and try to rebuild their marriage, or walk away and start anew. She sought solace in her friends and a therapist, who helped her navigate her emotions. In the end, Susan chose herself. She filed for divorce, determined to reclaim her life and find happiness on her own terms. Months later, Susan stood on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the sunset. She had started a new job and was rediscovering her passions. Peter's betrayal had broken her, but it had also set her free. As for Peter, he moved to another city, leaving behind the wreckage of his choices. Cecilia's fleeting romance with him ended soon after, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. Susan's journey wasn't easy, but it taught her the value of self-love and resilience. She learned that sometimes the hardest endings pave the way for the most beautiful beginnings.